This is One Fat Boy, and here are my NBA game predictions for February 4th of 2022. Tonight there is 9 games. I will be going over the spreads and over-unders. I got my data from FanDuel for the spreads, and then the over-unders are just my thoughts on the games. For Cleveland at Charlotte, I'll be leaning towards Charlotte -5. Even though Charlotte's been struggling, it's just Garland is out for the Cavaliers, and I think that's going to be a little much as Cleveland lost against the Rockets, who are not a great team, so I do expect this to be a closer game, but I do expect Charlotte to come out with a win as they just have most of their parts there, and especially if they get going from 3, it's hard to beat the Hornets, so hence why I'm leaning towards a little bit of a higher scoring game, because usually Cleveland has some decent defense, and Charlotte usually has decent offense, so I'm just going to have to say if this goes into a shootout, it's like Charlotte should come out with the win in a high-scoring game. If this turns out to be more defensive, Cleveland should come out with the win, but I expect this to still be a close game, but Charlotte should pull away at the end. With Chicago at Indiana. So personally, I wouldn't really touch this game on the spread, but if I were to lean towards a team winning or covering the spread, I'd lean towards Indiana, just due to the fact that Levine is still day-to-day for the Bulls, so a lot of the offense has to run through DeRozan and Vucevic. So that's a lot of pressure put onto them. It's not spread out between like Ball and Levine too. And then Indiana, they're getting more of their players back. They've been keeping their games close and just keeping their games like in winnable ways. So just gonna follow that pattern that Indiana has been putting up against struggling teams and even better teams, so that Indiana will keep the game close overall. But personally, I'd maybe just bump that spread a little higher, maybe up to like 5.5 or 6.5 for Indiana plus. Just give you a little bit more breathing room. And then I will say over 218.5, as with the important wing defenders out for the Bulls, Indiana should take advantage of that, and they should make a few more threes, or about on pace for what they usually make, or a little bit more. And then the Bulls, I think between DeRozan, Vucevic, it's like, yeah, their offense may struggle overall, but if DeRozan gets hot, or one of the role players or random players that you just don't know just catches fire, it's like that'll also score a lot. But I think Indiana will just be more consistent in their scoring and leads them towards them winning or keeping the game close for over 218.5. For the Celtics at Detroit, I'll lean towards Boston -8.5. So Detroit played last night against the Timberwolves, so they're playing on the second night of a back-to-back, while Boston is not. So they're gonna be a little more fresher, and also they're the better team, and Detroit is one of those bottom-feeding teams. So Boston, they should win, just to like keep themselves in the playoff race, like in a good seed. And then they should be able to cover the spread, because if I'm Boston, it's like I got to confirm these wins, so I got to win these games in the first half. So I should be able to blow out the Pistons, no problem. I will be going under 218.5 because I believe Boston will win this on their defense and really slow down the Detroit offense. And then Boston, it's really like hit or miss if they will score a lot, but say they score 120, but Detroit's is in the 90s overall for their scoring, it's going to be under 218. So I'm really just playing on Boston to be around that 115 mark, really not go into the high 120s, and I'll be going with the under 218.5. For Atlanta at Toronto, I'll be leaning towards Toronto -1.5. So Atlanta played last night against the Suns, and they won on the back of Trae Young. And now they have to travel up to Toronto, and so that's just like traveling in one day, so they're going to be tired from that. And then Toronto, they also played last night in overtime. But personally, for choosing the spread, it's like if I did have to choose a team, I just lean towards Toronto, as they just give 100% effort all the time. But we're also dealing with the second half of the season Hawks, who always turn it around and just start to win all their games. So you're just really it's like an unmovable object and an unstoppable force. It's just like one of those two things. But if I had to choose a winner, I'd lean towards Toronto, as they just are able to put up more shots just because, like, hustling, steals, grabbing offensive rebounds. They just put up more shots, and that usually will lead to more wins. But personally, don't bet on the spread for this game, as it'll probably be too close, or unless you just have a really good, strong feeling about this. But I do have a better feeling that both these teams will be shooting good, or well enough to get over 219.5, as the Hawks can get going from 3, and then Toronto will probably be getting some offensive boards, some steals, just keeping the game close and getting the baskets when they need it. For the Rockets at the Spurs, I lean towards the Spurs -3. So the Spurs have been playing better than the Rockets, even though the Rockets beat injured Cleveland team. I think the Spurs playing at home, and they've been playing better, and I'm sure Murray would want to show why he was snubbed for being an all-star, or at least want to get that injury reserve spot for the all-star game. So I'm sure he's going to want to have him try a good game against the Rockets. And I'll just be leaning towards the Spurs to win this game. They've just been a little bit more consistent as of late, scoring a lot of points. And I don't know, it's always hard to lose a game when you're scoring over like 120 points. So that means you also have to give up 120 points. But you're also playing the Rockets, who also play no defense and score a lot of points. So I think the Spurs will be able to outshoot the Rockets. And I'll be going with over 229.5. I honestly predict the spread when it will come out for the over-under, like later tonight or in the morning. It'll be like probably 236 or somewhere in there, but I think it'd be safer to do it over 229.5. And that's what I will be going with, just because these are two teams, well, especially the Spurs as of late, who are just been pumping up points on the board. For the Nets at the Jazz, I'll have to lean towards Brooklyn +5.5. So Utah, they're still injured, and then Brooklyn are struggling, but they'll at least have Irving and Harden playing for them. But it's like, can those two just put forth the effort to have like a winning game? Because if they get rattled, they are rattled. Their mental is weak. And then the Jazz, they do keep their games close, but winning by more than 5.5, I think that's a little bit too much of a spread for the Jazz. And then Brooklyn, if they get going, and it's like they're hard to stop. It's like, yeah, there's still Irving and Harden on the same team. And then they also have lost 6 in a row. It's like, I see them losing 7 in a row? Well, they shouldn't, but I could see it. But it should be a close game, though. If I'm Brooklyn, it's like, this is a must-win game, so they have to come in with that mentality. And if they do win, it will be on the back of their offense, as their defense, it's iffy, but if they're scoring a lot of points, that kind of inspires their defense, so it will. Like, if they do win, it should be a high-scoring game, so hence I'll be leaning towards a higher-scoring game with over 223.5. For the Pelicans at the Nuggets, so with Jokic back, I'm pretty sure Denver should come out and win this, especially after losing against the Jazz. And they at least kept it close against the Jazz without Jokic, but with him back, a little bit of rest, a little bit of time to heal up. No one's going to slow him down. I should have a very well-rounded game for the Denver Nuggets, and the Pelicans will just have a tough time just trying to deal with him all game. I will expect this game to be over 215.5 due to the fact that I think Jokic will be able to pick apart the New Orleans offense, and then Denver's defense kind of hit or miss. So the Pelicans, they could still score, but I think if it comes more up and down, both teams are scoring, I think Denver can put together a few stops in a row to slow down the Pelicans, build their lead up a little bit, but I think both teams will be able to get their share of points with over 215.5. For the Sixers at the Mavericks, we go with Philadelphia +1, but personally, I won't be touching the spread on this game too much, as for both these teams, you don't know which one is going to show up. Like, is the high-scoring version of the teams are going to show up, or are the two defensive teams are going to show up? It's like, which version of each team is going to show up? The Mavericks are pretty more consistent on defense. So, and they do have some people that could deal with Embiid. And then in turn, like the Sixers can clamp down on the Mavericks, who are kind of like up and down in their scoring. And then offensively, like Embiid and Jokic, they're going to be going at it. It's just two different ways of scoring. But I will be leaning towards an under 220.5, as I think this is going to be a slower pace game, so it's harder to rack up those points in a slower pace game. A lot of like ISO, not many fast springs, but more like ISO, longer shot clock plays, just lower possession count, lower amount of shots, hence under 220.5. For the Thunder at Portland, I'll be going with going with the Thunder plus 7.5. I think Portland's been struggling too much to try and get a win from a Thunder team who've also been struggling, but they at least bring effort every game, no matter who they're playing against. Though they may just have a tough time like making their shots, but they're diving on the floor for balls. They're fighting for offensive rebounds, getting rebounds, and that will just keep them close. Like I don't expect Portland to blow out the Thunder, so that's why I'm just going to bet the Thunder just to keep it close, because that's a safer bet than like Portland winning or Portland winning by 7.5 points. So just the Thunder keeping it close. I will be going under 214.5, as Thunder games, they can be very low scoring games. Same with Portland. And honestly, that's how they kind of been playing the past few games. Or at least Portland, and kind of a mix of OKC, especially without Gilgeous-Alexander. That's just another scoring option that the Thunder won't have. So I just lean towards the under. If this under goes like under 214.5, when like the over-unders are released, I'd probably just still hang around that 214.5. If it's higher, maybe just bump that up 1 point, but it's like 214.5 seems reasonable. Thank you for watching. Once again, just leave any of your comments on what your thoughts on the games were, and thanks for watching.